Maya and Jake Thompson thought inheriting Uncle Edgar's garage was just another burden they couldn't afford. The young couple was already drowning in student loans and credit card debt, working multiple jobs just to keep their tiny apartment. When the lawyer handed them the keys to a crumbling garage in an abandoned industrial district, they saw only more problems ahead. The building looked ready to collapse, filled with decades of rusty tools, broken furniture, and what appeared to be worthless junk. But as they began clearing out the debris to prepare for demolition, Jake's crowbar struck something unexpected behind a wall of old newspapers. The hollow sound revealed a hidden compartment containing wooden crates that hadn't been opened in 60 years. Inside, those crates lay documents, gold coins, and blueprints that would change their lives forever. But would this incredible discovery become their salvation or their doom? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Rodriguez had always believed that hard work would eventually pay off. But at 26, she was beginning to question that fundamental assumption. Standing in the cramped kitchen of their studio apartment, she stared at the stack of overdue bills while waiting for the ancient coffee maker to finish its grinding routine. The red stamps and bold letters seemed to mock her marketing degree and Jake's engineering background. They were educated, motivated, and completely broke. Jake Thompson emerged from their makeshift bedroom area, his sandy hair still damp from the shower. At 28, he carried himself with the quiet determination of someone who had learned to fix things with his hands when money couldn't solve problems. His calloused fingers, stained with motor oil from his night shift at the auto repair shop, reached for the coffee pot Maya had just filled. "Another letter from the student loan people," Maya said, holding up an envelope with the familiar government seal. "They're threatening to garnish wages again." Jake's jaw tightened as he poured coffee into two mismatched mugs they'd rescued from a thrift store. "My boss mentioned overtime this weekend. Double time for emergency repairs. You're already working 60 hours a week." Maya's voice carried the weight of exhaustion they both felt. Between her day job at a struggling marketing firm and her evening shifts serving tables, she barely saw Jake except for these quiet morning moments before the world demanded their attention again. The knock at their door came precisely at 8 a.m., just as Maya was gathering her purse and Jake was checking his work schedule on his phone. Through the peephole, Maya saw a man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase, looking decidedly out of place in their building's dingy hallway. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson?" the man asked when Maya opened the door. "I'm Robert Hartwell from Hartwell, Barnes & Associates. I've been trying to reach you regarding the estate of Edgar Thompson." Maya and Jake exchanged glances. Uncle Edgar had been Jake's father's brother, a peculiar man who had disappeared from family gatherings decades ago. Jake's memories of him were hazy at best. A thin man with thick glasses who smelled like machine oil and spoke in technical terms that flew over everyone's heads. Edgar passed away 6 weeks ago. Hartwell continued, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "According to his will, you've inherited his property on Industrial Way. I apologize for the delay in contacting you. The estate has been complicated to settle." Hartwell produced a manila folder from his briefcase, extracting documents that looked official and intimidating. "The property consists of a garage and small office space. I should warn you, the building has been abandoned for several years and will likely require substantial investment to bring up to code." Jake studied the property deed, noting the address in a part of town they rarely visited, an industrial area that had seen better days. "What kind of shape is it in?" "Honestly, poor, very poor. The previous tenant vacated 3 years ago and Edgar never bothered with maintenance. The city has been considering it for demolition." Hartwell's expression suggested he was delivering bad news rather than announcing an inheritance. Maya felt her heart sink. Another financial burden disguised as a gift. "Are there any liens on the property? Outstanding debts we'd be responsible for?" "The property taxes are current, and there are no outstanding liens. Edgar was meticulous about certain things, even if building maintenance wasn't one of them. Hartwell handed Jake a set of keys that looked older than both of them combined. I'd recommend visiting the property before making any decisions about its future. After Hartwell left, Maya and Jake sat at their tiny kitchen table, staring at the keys and documents. The photograph tucked behind the deed showed a simple concrete building with large bay doors, the kind of place that had housed small manufacturing operations during the city's industrial heyday. We could sell it for the land value, Maya suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. In their neighborhood, even empty lots weren't worth much. Or we could take a look first, Jake said, turning the heavy keys over in his palm. Edgar was strange, but he wasn't stupid. Maybe there's something there worth salvaging. Maya studied the black and white photograph more closely. Behind the building, barely visible in the image, stood a thin figure in work clothes, presumably Edgar himself. Something about his posture, the way he held himself, suggested a man guarding secrets rather than simply posing for a picture. "When was this taken?" she asked, checking the back of the photograph. In faded pencil, someone had written E.T. 1967, "The work continues. The work continues." Maya found herself wondering what kind of work Uncle Edgar had been so dedicated to that he'd spent decades in that lonely building. And why, after all these years of estrangement from his family, had he chosen to leave it to Jake? That afternoon, they drove through the industrial district toward the address on the deed. The neighborhood bore the scars of economic decline. Empty lots where factories once stood, broken windows in abandoned warehouses, weeds growing through cracked asphalt. But as they turned onto Industrial Way, Maya noticed something unexpected. Several of the buildings showed signs of recent renovation, and there were more cars parked on the street than she'd expected. Uncle Edgar's garage sat at the end of a row of similar buildings, distinguished mainly by its particularly weathered appearance. The paint had long since faded to an indeterminate grey, and the windows were so dirty they might as well have been painted black. But the structure itself looked solid, built from an era when construction meant permanence rather than convenience. Jake fitted the larger key into the main door's lock, surprised when it turned smoothly despite its obvious age. The door swung open with a groan that suggested it hadn't been disturbed in years, releasing a smell of old motor oil, dust, and something else, something metallic and sharp that Maya couldn't identify. The interior revealed exactly what they'd expected, decades of accumulated junk. Workbenches lined the walls, their surfaces buried under layers of tools, parts, and projects in various stages of completion. Oil stains darkened the concrete floor in patterns that told stories of countless repairs and experiments. Fluorescent light fixtures hung from the ceiling, most of their bulbs dark or missing entirely. But as Maya's eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the dirty windows, she began to notice details that seemed inconsistent with simple automotive repair. The workbenches were covered with precision instruments she didn't recognize. Blueprints and technical drawings covered one entire wall, held in place by pushpins and masking tape that had yellowed with age. And in the corner, partially hidden by a tarp, sat what appeared to be a sophisticated piece of machinery that definitely didn't belong in an ordinary garage. Jake was examining a workbench covered with electronic components when his foot caught on something protruding from the floor. Looking down, he saw a corner of what appeared to be a wooden crate, buried under years of accumulated debris. "Maya, come look at this." Together, they began clearing away the layer of old newspapers, discarded parts, and shop rags that had accumulated over the crate. As they worked, Maya noticed that the newspapers weren't random. They were carefully arranged, as if someone had deliberately concealed what lay beneath. The crate itself was old, but well constructed, made from heavy wood and bound with metal straps that had developed a patina of age, but showed no signs of rust. Stenciled on the side in faded black letters were the words, "E. Thompson, Private." Jake ran his hand along the crate's surface, feeling for a latch or opening mechanism. "It's locked," he said, "but the wood around the lock looks like it might give way if we pry it carefully." Maya glanced around the garage, taking in the organized chaos with new eyes. "Jake, look at this place. Really look at it. This isn't just a repair shop. This is someone's life work." She was right. The more they examined their surroundings, the more apparent it became that Edgar Thompson had been working on something significant in this garage. The question was what and why he'd hidden it so carefully that even his own family never suspected its existence. As Jake positioned a crowbar against the crate's lock, Maya felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Whatever Uncle Edgar had been protecting in this forgotten corner of the city, they were about to become its inheritors. Whether that would prove to be a blessing or a burden remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. Their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The crowbar slipped against the old metal lock twice before Jake found the right angle. With a sharp crack that echoed through the garage, the wood around the latch splintered and the crate's lid shifted slightly upward. Maya held her breath as Jake carefully lifted the heavy wooden cover, revealing layers of oiled cloth that had protected the contents for decades. "Jesus," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible in the dusty silence. Nestled in the first layer of cloth was a collection of items that seemed to belong in a museum rather than an abandoned garage. Maya reached for what appeared to be a coin, her fingers trembling as she lifted it into the pale light streaming through the dirty windows. The metal felt substantial, heavy with age and purpose. Even tarnished, she could make out the distinctive profile of Lady Liberty and the date that made her heart skip, 1933. "Jake, this is a double eagle," Maya said, her marketing background having exposed her to enough luxury goods to recognize something extraordinary when she saw it. "These are worth... if this is real, we're talking about serious money." Jake was already digging deeper into the crate, his engineer's mind cataloging the contents with methodical precision. Beneath the coins, and there were dozens of them, each wrapped individually in protective cloth, lay stacks of documents bound with ribbon that had somehow maintained its deep blue color despite the passing decades. The paper felt expensive, substantial, nothing like the cheap copy paper they were accustomed to handling. "Look at this," Jake said, carefully extracting a blueprint that had been rolled and secured with a metal clip. As he unrolled it on the nearest workbench, both of them leaned in to examine the intricate technical drawings. The title at the top read, "Atmospheric Energy Conversion Device, Patent Application, E. Thompson, Principal Investigator." Maya studied the detailed schematics, her eyes tracing the complex network of components and connections that meant nothing to her, but clearly represented something significant. "Patent application? Edgar was an inventor?" "Not just an inventor," Jake said, his voice growing more amazed as he examined the technical specifications. "Maya, this is incredible. These drawings show a device that could theoretically extract energy directly from atmospheric electricity. If this actually works..." He trailed off, but Maya understood the implications. They were looking at blueprints for technology that could revolutionize energy production, diagrams that had been hidden in a wooden crate for God knows how many years, while the world struggled with fossil fuels and environmental destruction. "There's more," Maya said, reaching deeper into the crate. Her fingers encountered something unexpected, a leather-bound ledger that felt warm to the touch, as if it had been recently handled. The cover bore Edgar's initials embossed in gold that had barely faded. Inside, page after page of meticulous handwriting documented experiments, measurements, and observations that spanned decades. But it was the loose papers tucked inside the back cover that made Maya's blood run cold. Correspondence on official letterhead from companies she recognized, major energy corporations, government agencies, research institutions. And the tone of the letters was unmistakably threatening. "Mr. Thompson," one letter began, "we trust you understand the implications of pursuing your current research direction. Certain technologies, while theoretically feasible, pose unacceptable risks to market stability. We strongly advise discontinuing your work and accepting our previous offer for your patents and research materials." Jake read over her shoulder, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. They were trying to buy him off, or shut him down. "Look at the dates," Maya said, pointing to the correspondence. "These letters span 20 years. Edgar was fighting this battle for 2 decades. The sound of a car door slamming outside made them both freeze. Through the grimy windows, Maya could see a dark sedan parked across the street, its engine still running. A man in a suit stood beside it, speaking into a cell phone while keeping his eyes fixed on the garage. "How long has he been there?" Jake asked, moving away from the window. "I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the street." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garage's temperature. "You think it's a coincidence?" Jake was already gathering the most important documents, his movements quick and efficient. "In my experience, when you find a fortune in gold coins and revolutionary technology blueprints, there's no such thing as coincidence." They worked quickly to inventory the crate's contents. Beyond the coins and blueprints, they found component lists, supplier contacts, and what appeared to be a complete manufacturing plan for Edgar's atmospheric energy device. Everything needed to reproduce his work was there, meticulously organized and preserved. "We need to get this stuff out of here," Jake said, glancing toward the windows. "If Edgar spent 20 years hiding this technology, there's a reason." Maya was already looking for containers to transport their discovery. In a corner of the garage, she found several heavy-duty toolboxes that would conceal the documents and coins without drawing attention. As they transferred everything from the crate, she noticed something else, a small key taped to the inside of the lid, along with a note in Edgar's careful handwriting: "Safety Deposit Box 247, First National Downtown." The rest of the story? Jake echoed. "You mean there's more?" Before Maya could respond, the sound of footsteps on gravel outside made them both look toward the door. The man from the sedan was walking directly toward the garage, his stride purposeful and unhurried. In his hand, Maya could see what looked like a photograph. "Back door," Jake said quietly, grabbing 2 of the toolboxes. Now, they slipped out through the rear exit just as the man reached the front entrance. Maya's heart pounded as they made their way to their car, trying to appear casual while carrying what might be the most valuable discovery of their lives. As Jake started the engine, she caught a glimpse of the man in her side mirror. He was standing in the garage doorway, holding up what appeared to be a photograph and comparing it to something inside. "He knows exactly what he's looking for," Maya said. "Then we'd better figure out what we've found before he does." As they drove away, Maya clutched the safety deposit box key and wondered what other secrets Uncle Edgar had been protecting. The golden coin in her pocket felt like a talisman, a promise that their lives had just taken a turn toward possibilities they'd never dared imagine. But the man in the suit and the threatening letters suggested that some discoveries came with a price that might be higher than they were prepared to pay. The question now was whether they were brave enough or desperate enough to find out what that price might be. Maya's hands shook as she spread Edgar's patent documents across their kitchen table, the technical drawings looking surreal against the familiar backdrop of unpaid bills and grocery store coupons. Jake had called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years, claiming he needed to deal with a family emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. "Look at this section," Maya said, pointing to a detailed schematic labeled Resonance Chamber Configuration. Edgar wasn't just theorizing. These blueprints include manufacturing tolerances, material specifications, even supplier part numbers. "This is a complete production plan." Jake leaned over her shoulder, his engineering background helping him decipher the technical complexity of Edgar's work. "The theory is sound," he said slowly. "Atmospheric electricity has been studied for decades, but no one's figured out how to harness it efficiently. Edgar's design uses a resonance chamber to amplify and focus the electrical field before conversion. It's brilliant." Maya pulled up her laptop and began researching the companies mentioned in Edgar's correspondence. What she found made her stomach turn. "Jake, Every single corporation that tried to shut Edgar down has made billions from traditional energy. Oil, coal, natural gas. If Edgar's technology actually works, it would put them out of business, Jake finished. Clean, unlimited energy from the atmosphere. No drilling, no mining, no pollution. The patent documents told a story of systematic suppression that spanned 2 decades. Edgar Thompson had been a brilliant inventor working alone against an entire industry determined to protect their profits. Application after application had been denied on technical grounds that Maya's research revealed to be questionable at best. When legal tactics failed, the corporations had resorted to more direct methods. "Listen to this," Maya said, reading from a letter dated 1985. "Mr. Thompson, your continued pursuit of atmospheric energy research constitutes a threat to national energy security. We strongly advise you to accept our acquisition offer and discontinue all related activities. Further persistence may result in consequences beyond our control." Jake was examining what appeared to be a component list when he noticed something odd. "Maya, these part numbers aren't random. They're encoded." He grabbed a pencil and began working through the numerical patterns. Edgar embedded his real research data in fake parts lists. The man was paranoid, but he was smart about it. A knock at their door made them both freeze. Through the peephole, Maya saw a middle-aged woman in a police uniform, her expression serious but not threatening. She opened the door cautiously. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Detective Rivera, Metro Police. I'd like to ask you a few questions about some unusual activity in your neighborhood." Maya's heart raced, but she invited the detective inside. Rivera was a compact woman with sharp eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of their modest apartment. "We've had reports of suspicious vehicles in the industrial district where you recently inherited property," Rivera said, settling into their only decent chair. "Neighbors noticed increased activity around your uncle's garage. Have you observed anything unusual during your visits there?" Jake and Maya exchanged glances. "We've only been there once," Jake said carefully. "Yesterday afternoon. We're still trying to figure out what to do with the property." Rivera nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't getting the whole story. "Your uncle was an interesting man. Lived quietly for decades. But in the past few months before his death, we received several complaints about people watching his building, following him to the grocery store. Edgar called our office twice, claiming someone was trying to steal his work." "What kind of work?" Maya asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew. He never gave specifics. Just kept saying he'd invented something important, something that certain people didn't want to see the light of day. Rivera leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Thompson, if you found anything at that garage that might explain why your uncle felt threatened, I'd appreciate knowing about it." Maya felt the weight of the safety deposit box key in her pocket and the gold coin she'd wrapped in tissue paper. "We found mostly junk. Old tools, car parts, nothing that seemed valuable." Rivera studied her face for a long moment. "I see. Well, if that changes, please call me." She handed Maya a business card. "And be careful. Whatever Edgar was worried about, it didn't die with him." After Rivera left, Maya and Jake sat in tense silence. The detective's visit had made their situation real in a way that finding treasure hadn't. Edgar Thompson had been murdered. That much was now clear, and whoever killed him was still out there, still interested in his work. "We need to get to that safety deposit box," Jake said finally. "Whatever Edgar hid there might explain what we're really dealing with." Maya was already gathering the documents when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled her to answer. "Miss Rodriguez." The voice was male, cultured, with an accent she couldn't place. "My name is Marcus Webb. I represent certain interests regarding the estate of Edgar Thompson. I believe we need to talk." "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya said, though her voice betrayed her nervousness. "Please don't insult my intelligence. You visited the garage yesterday, you removed certain items, and now you're wondering what to do with them. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer for Edgar's research materials." Maya's blood ran cold. How do you know what Ms. Rodriguez? You and your husband have stumbled into something much larger than you understand. Edgar Thompson was a brilliant man who made the mistake of developing technology that threatens very powerful interests. I'm offering you a way out of this situation that benefits everyone. Jake had moved close enough to hear both sides of the conversation. He shook his head firmly. I'm not interested in selling anything, Maya said. Webb's tone shifted, becoming colder. I hope you'll reconsider. Edgar thought he could protect his work by hiding it, by fighting powerful corporations with moral righteousness and patent applications. You can see how well that worked out for him. The line went dead. Maya stared at her phone, her hands trembling. Jake, what have we gotten ourselves into? Jake was already moving toward their bedroom, pulling a duffel bag from the closet. I don't know, but we're not staying here to find out. Pack the essentials. We're going to that bank, and then we're going somewhere safe until we figure out our next move. As Maya threw clothes into a bag, she thought about Edgar Thompson spending 20 years alone in that garage. Brilliant and isolated, fighting a battle against forces that ultimately killed him. She and Jake had inherited more than property and treasure. They'd inherited a war that had been raging for decades. The question now was whether they were strong enough to finish what Edgar had started, or wise enough to walk away before they suffered his fate. But looking at the revolutionary blueprints spread across their table, Maya realized that walking away might no longer be an option. Some discoveries were too important to abandon, even when the cost of pursuing them might be everything they had. The First National Bank downtown looked like a fortress built to withstand both economic collapse and direct assault. Maya and Jake approached the safety deposit box section with the nervous energy of people who knew they were being watched, but couldn't see by whom. The key Edgar had hidden felt like it weighed 10 pounds in Maya's pocket. Box 247, Maya told the bank officer. A stern woman who examined their identification with the thoroughness of a customs agent. We're here as executors of Edgar Thompson's estate. The officer led them through a series of security doors to a room lined with numbered metal boxes. Box 247 was larger than Maya had expected, requiring 2 keys to open. Inside, they found a leather-bound ledger that made the documents they'd already discovered look like rough notes. The ledger was Edgar's true masterwork, a detailed record of 23 years of research. Experiments and discoveries that read like a combination of scientific journal and spy novel. But it was the business entries that made Maya's hands shake as she read. Jake, listen to this, she whispered, reading from an entry dated 1987. Meeting with Harrison Industries representatives. Offered $2.3 million for all patents and research materials, plus permanent consulting contract. Declined. They seemed disappointed is too mild a word. Angry, threatened. Jake leaned over her shoulder, scanning the meticulous handwriting that documented Edgar's increasingly isolated battle against corporate interests. Look at the amounts, he said. The offers kept increasing. By 1995, they were offering $27 million. And Edgar kept refusing, Maya said, turning pages that revealed a pattern of escalating pressure. Corporate lawyers, private investigators, break-in attempts, even suspected sabotage of Edgar's equipment. He knew what he had, and he knew what it meant for the world. The ledger contained names, dates, and documentation that painted a picture of systematic suppression spanning decades. Major energy corporations working together to prevent atmospheric energy technology from reaching the market. Government officials pressured to deny patents. Research facilities that suffered mysterious accidents when they got too close to Edgar's discoveries. But the most chilling entries were the personal ones. Edgar had documented surveillance following and threats against not just himself, but anyone who showed interest in his work. A graduate student who had requested technical details for a thesis project was expelled from university on fabricated plagiarism charges. A journalist investigating energy suppression died in a car accident that police ruled suspicious but never solved. Maya, look at this, Jake said, pointing to an entry from 1999. Edgar suspected his phone was tapped, his mail intercepted. He started using code names for his contacts and dead drops for sensitive communications. Maya flipped to the back of the ledger, where Edgar had maintained a list of contacts, people he trusted, people who had helped him over the years. Most of the names had been crossed out with dates beside them. Deaths, disappearances, people who had simply stopped responding to his communications. But one name wasn't crossed out: Mrs. Chen, 1247 Maple Street, Protector. Mrs. Chen, Maya said. That's our neighbor from the garage district. She tried to warn us about people asking questions. Jake was studying a technical diagram tucked into the ledger's back cover. This isn't just research notes, he said. It's a complete manufacturing plan. Edgar figured out how to mass-produce his atmospheric energy devices. Maya, we're not just looking at scientific discovery here. We're looking at the blueprint for changing the entire global energy economy. The implications were staggering. If Edgar's technology could be manufactured and distributed, it would make fossil fuels obsolete overnight. Entire industries would collapse. Trillions of dollars in existing infrastructure would become worthless, and the geopolitical balance of power would shift dramatically. No wonder they killed him, Maya whispered. They photographed every page of the ledger with Jake's phone, working quickly, while trying to appear casual to the bank cameras they knew were recording their every move. As they prepared to leave, Maya noticed something else in the safety deposit box, a small manila envelope labeled Insurance Policy. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a brief note. If something happens to me, take everything to this location. They will know what to do. Trust no one else. E.T. The address was in a small town 3 hours north, a place called Cedar Falls that Maya had never heard of. The note was dated just 6 months ago, suggesting Edgar had sensed his time was running out. As they left the bank, Maya felt eyes on them from multiple directions. A man reading a newspaper by the bus stop. A woman talking on her phone near the parking garage entrance. A delivery truck that had been parked across the street when they arrived and was still there when they left. We're being watched, she said quietly as they reached their car. I know, Jake replied. The question is whether they're going to let us leave. They drove in silence for several blocks, taking random turns and checking their mirrors constantly. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Enjoying your research? Time is running out for voluntary cooperation. Jake saw her face and pulled into a parking garage. What is it? Maya showed him the text. Marcus Webb. He's not going to wait much longer. Then we need to get to Cedar Falls tonight, Jake said. Whatever Edgar had planned, whatever backup he put in place, we need to find it before Webb decides to stop making offers. As they sat in the dim parking garage, surrounded by the concrete walls that felt more like a bunker than a shelter, Maya realized they had crossed a line. They were no longer just inheritors of Edgar's property. They were the guardians of technology that could change the world or get them killed trying to protect. Yet the ledger in her bag contained enough evidence to expose decades of corporate conspiracy and suppression. The question was whether they could survive long enough to use it, or whether they would become the next crossed-out names in someone else's record of Edgar Thompson's dangerous legacy. Jake started the car again, his jaw set with determination. We're going to finish what Edgar started, he said. Whatever the cost, Maya nodded, though she wondered if they truly understood what that cost might be. Some fights were worth having, but Edgar Thompson's story was a reminder that righteousness and good intentions weren't always enough to protect you from people with unlimited resources and no moral constraints. As they pulled back onto the street, heading toward the highway that would take them to Cedar Falls, Maya clutched the ledger and prayed that Edgar's insurance policy would prove more effective than his 23 years of fighting alone had been. The drive to Cedar Falls took them through countryside that seemed frozen in an earlier decade, past farms and small towns where progress had arrived slowly and technology even slower. Maya found herself checking the mirrors obsessively. But the highway behind them remained reassuringly empty of suspicious vehicles. The address Edgar had provided led them to a modest ranch house on the outskirts of town, its yard filled with the kind of practical landscaping that suggested people who valued function over appearance. An elderly woman answered their knock, Asian, probably in her 70s, with the alert eyes of someone who had learned to be cautious about unexpected visitors. "Mrs. Chen?" Maya asked, though she already knew this had to be Edgar's protector from the ledger. The woman's expression shifted from wariness to recognition. "You're Jake Thompson. You look like your uncle when he was young." She stepped aside to let them enter. "I've been expecting you, though I hoped it would never come to this." Mrs. Chen led them to a living room that felt like a museum of careful preservation. Family photographs covered every surface, and the furniture looked like it had been maintained rather than replaced for decades. But Maya noticed details that suggested this wasn't an ordinary elderly woman's home. Security cameras discreetly positioned, windows with reinforced glass, and what appeared to be a sophisticated alarm system. "Edgar came to see me 6 months ago," Mrs. Chen said, settling into a chair that gave her a clear view of both the front and back entrances. He was frightened. More frightened than I'd seen him in 20 years of friendship. She produced a manila envelope from a drawer in an antique writing desk. "He left this with me, along with instructions that I was only to open it if something happened to him." Maya felt her stomach clench. "Something did happen to him," Mrs. Chen nodded gravely. "I know. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but Edgar's heart was strong. He was murdered just as he predicted he would be." She opened the envelope and extracted a document that made Maya's breath catch. It was a death certificate, but not Edgar's official death certificate. This one was different, marked with stamps and seals that looked medical and official. "Edgar suspected his death was being planned," Mrs. Chen explained. "He convinced a friend at the medical examiner's office to run tests that wouldn't appear on the official autopsy. This is what they found." Maya read the document with growing horror. "Polonium poisoning. Edgar was radioactively poisoned. The same method used to kill dissidents and whistleblowers," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "Expensive, sophisticated, and virtually undetectable unless you know what to look for." Edgar knew what to look for. Jake leaned forward, his face pale. "How long have you known Edgar?" 23 years. I was his research partner originally, before the pressure became too intense." Mrs. Chen's voice carried the weight of old decisions and abandoned dreams. "I have a doctorate in theoretical physics from MIT. Edgar and I developed the atmospheric energy technology together." Maya felt the room spin slightly. "You're a physicist." "Was. I became a housewife and part-time bookkeeper when Edgar's corporate enemies started targeting our families. My husband was transferred to a dead-end job. My children received scholarship rejections from universities that had previously courted them. The message was clear: abandon the research or watch your family suffer." Mrs. Chen moved to another drawer and withdrew a thick file folder. "But I never stopped monitoring Edgar's work. And I never stopped documenting the conspiracy against him. What you found in his garage and safety deposit box is only part of the story. The file contained correspondence between energy executives, government officials, and what appeared to be private security companies. Email printouts, meeting transcripts, and financial records that painted a picture of systematic suppression that extended far beyond Edgar's individual case. Atmospheric energy technology has been discovered independently 7 times. In the past 40 years, Mrs. Chen explained, every inventor who got close to a breakthrough was either bought off, discredited, or eliminated. Edgar was the 8th. Maya studied a financial document that showed payments to a company called Executive Solutions for something labeled technology, containment services. The amounts were staggering, hundreds of millions of dollars spent over decades to prevent clean energy technology from reaching the market. Mrs. Chen, Jake said carefully, if you know all this, if you have all this evidence, why haven't you gone public? The older woman smiled sadly. With what credibility? I'm an elderly Asian woman living in a small town, making wild accusations against some of the most powerful corporations in the world. Who would believe me? But Maya was studying another document from the file, and what she found made her heart race. Jake, look at this. Edgar wasn't the only heir to his work. The document was a partnership agreement, dated 1987, establishing a joint venture between Edgar Thompson and someone named David Harrison for the development and commercialization of atmospheric energy technology. The agreement specified that if either partner died, their heir would inherit both the technology and the responsibility for protecting it. David Harrison, Maya said. Where have I heard that name? Mrs. Chen's expression grew grim. Harrison Industries? One of the companies that's been trying to suppress Edgar's work for 20 years. David Harrison was Edgar's original business partner before the corporations got to him. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. You mean there's another heir? Someone else who has a legal claim to Edgar's technology. David Harrison died 3 years ago, Mrs. Chen said. His son Michael inherited his father's share of the partnership agreement. Michael Harrison, who happens to be the CEO of Harrison Industries. Jake stared at the partnership document. So the man who's been trying to suppress Edgar's technology is actually Edgar's legal partner. Michael Harrison has been fighting a war against his own inheritance, Mrs. Chen confirmed. His father felt guilty about abandoning Edgar and the technology, but Michael sees it as a threat to the energy empire his family built. He's been systematically destroying any evidence of the original partnership while publicly opposing Edgar's work. Maya felt pieces clicking into place. That's why the suppression has been so effective. Harrison had inside information about Edgar's research because he was legally entitled to it. Mrs. Chen nodded. And now that Edgar is dead, Michael Harrison believes he's the sole inheritor of the atmospheric energy technology. He doesn't know that Edgar changed his will to include you. The death certificate in Maya's hands suddenly felt like more than just evidence of murder. It was proof that their lives were in immediate danger. If Harrison had killed Edgar to claim sole ownership of the technology, discovering that Edgar had other heirs would make Maya and Jake targets for elimination. Mrs. Chen, Maya said quietly, what exactly did Edgar want us to do with this information? The elderly woman stood and walked to a bookshelf, retrieving a sealed envelope marked with Maya and Jake's names. He wanted you to have a choice. You can take the evidence we've gathered and disappear, start new lives somewhere. Harrison will never find you. Or you can do what Edgar never could. You can fight back. Maya opened the envelope and found detailed plans for exposing the conspiracy, contacting journalists, and releasing Edgar's technology to the public domain where no corporation could suppress it. But she also found something else, a warning that choosing to fight would mean accepting that their old lives were over, that they would spend the rest of their days as targets of people with unlimited resources and no moral constraints. As Maya read Edgar's final message, written in the careful handwriting she had come to recognize, she realized that inheriting his garage had been the easy part. Now they had to decide whether they were willing to inherit his war as well. Maya stared at Edgar's final letter until the words blurred together, her hands trembling as the full weight of their situation settled over her. The choice Edgar offered wasn't really a choice at all. They could run and spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, or they could fight and risk everything for a chance to complete Edgar's work. Mrs. Chen, Jake said quietly. Edgar's letter mentions a plan. What exactly did he have in mind? The elderly woman moved to a wall safe hidden behind a family photograph, her movements precise despite her age. Inside, Maya could see what appeared to be sophisticated recording equipment and multiple backup drives. Edgar was brilliant, but he was also paranoid. He documented everything, every threat, every meeting, every suspicious death of researchers working on similar technology. She withdrew a handheld recording device, older but clearly professional quality. This contains Edgar's confession, recorded 2 weeks before his death. He knew he was running out of time, so he created insurance, a complete record of the conspiracy, names, dates, financial transactions, everything. Maya took the device, surprised by its weight. The label on the side read, E.T. Final Testament, copy 3 of 12. Copy 3 of 12. Edgar was thorough. He created 12 copies and distributed them to contacts around the world, journalists, scientists, people he trusted to release the information if something happened to him. Mrs. Chen's expression grew troubled. But Harrison's people have been tracking down the copies. So far they've recovered 8. Jake felt his stomach drop. How many are left? 4, counting this one. But the others are in the hands of people who understand the danger. They won't release the information, unless they're certain they can do so safely. Mrs. Chen returned to the safe and withdrew a thick folder marked Operation Blackout. This is Edgar's plan for exposing the conspiracy and releasing his technology simultaneously. He realized that partial disclosure would just get people killed without accomplishing anything meaningful. Maya opened the folder and found herself looking at a coordinated strategy that would have impressed military planners. Edgar had identified key journalists at major newspapers, scientists at universities who could verify his technology, and government officials who might be sympathetic to clean energy initiatives. The plan called for simultaneous release of evidence through multiple channels, making it impossible for Harrison's people to suppress the story. The key is timing, Mrs. Chen explained. Everything has to happen at once, before they can react and shut down the sources. Edgar estimated we'd have a 6-hour window between initial disclosure and when Harrison's people could mobilize their resources. To contain the damage, Jake studied the technical specifications Edgar had prepared for public release. These aren't complete blueprints. Edgar held back critical information deliberately. The public release provides enough information to prove the technology works and to allow independent verification, but not enough for immediate reproduction. Edgar wanted to prevent the technology from being weaponized or monopolized by other corporations. Mrs. Chen produced another device, a modern smartphone connected to what appeared to be a sophisticated encryption system. Edgar set up secure communication channels with the remaining contacts. When we're ready to proceed, we can coordinate the release from here. Maya felt overwhelmed by the complexity of Edgar's preparations. Mrs. Chen, Edgar spent 20 years planning this. How are we supposed to execute something this complicated? You're not alone. Edgar's network is still active, still waiting for the signal to proceed. Dr. Sarah Kim at Stanford has verified Edgar's theoretical work. Robert Martinez at the Washington Post has been investigating energy suppression for years. Agent Lisa Chen at the FBI, my daughter, has been building a case against Harrison. Industries for conspiracy and murder. The revelation that Mrs. Chen's daughter was an FBI agent working the case added another layer to the intricate web Edgar had constructed. Maya began to understand that Edgar's paranoia had been matched by equally impressive preparation and foresight. There's something else, Mrs. Chen said, withdrawing a final item from the safe. It was a small metal device, sleek and modern-looking, about the size of a smartphone. Edgar built a working prototype of his atmospheric energy converter. This device can power a small house indefinitely, drawing energy directly from the electrical field that surrounds us constantly. Jake examined the device with the reverence of an engineer recognizing genuine innovation. This is incredible. How much power can it generate? The prototype produces about 5 kilowatts continuously. Edgar's calculations suggest that larger versions could power entire cities without any fuel input whatsoever. Mrs. Chen's voice carried both pride and sadness. This is what Harrison killed him to suppress. Maya understood that holding the device made her part of Edgar's legacy in a way that finding gold coins never could. This small metal box represented the potential to transform human civilization, to eliminate energy poverty and environmental destruction in one revolutionary step. Mrs. Chen, if we do this, if we proceed with Edgar's plan, what happens to you? The elderly woman smiled with surprising serenity. My daughter will protect me. And frankly, I'm 73 years old. I've spent 20 years keeping Edgar's secret, watching him fight alone while I hid in this house. It's time to finish what we started. Jake was studying the communication device when it chimed softly. A message appeared on the screen. Harrison's people found the Los Angeles contact. Dr. Reeves is missing. Time is running out. Need go, no-go decision within 24 hours. S.K. Maya felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Edgar Thompson had died to protect technology that could change the world. And now that responsibility had fallen to her and Jake. Michael Harrison had spent years systematically eliminating anyone who threatened his energy empire. But Edgar's final gambit offered a chance to expose the conspiracy and release the technology before Harrison could complete his suppression campaign. "Mrs. Chen," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt, "tell us exactly what we need to do." The elderly woman activated the communication system and began typing a message that would either complete Edgar's work or get them all killed in the attempt. As Maya watched her prepare to send coordinates and activation codes to contacts around the world, she realized that their decision to fight had already been made the moment they opened Edgar's first crate. Some discoveries, Maya thought, choose their discoverers rather than the other way around. Edgar Thompson had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, and now it was time to find out whether his faith in them had been justified. The message from Dr. Kim at Stanford had set everything in motion. Within 6 hours, Mrs. Chen's modest ranch house had transformed into a command center for Edgar's final operation. The secure communication system buzzed with encrypted messages from contacts around the world, each confirming their readiness to simultaneously release Edgar's evidence and technology specifications. Maya sat at the kitchen table, which was now covered with laptops, recording equipment, and backup drives containing decades of suppressed research. The weight of Edgar's confession, recording device in her hands, felt like holding a live grenade, powerful enough to destroy Harrison Industries, but dangerous enough to get them all killed if mishandled. Washington Post confirms they have the corporate conspiracy documents, Jake reported, monitoring one of the communication channels. Stanford has verified the technology and prepared their scientific review. FBI agent Chen has arrest warrants ready for Harrison and 6 of his associates. Mrs. Chen moved between the various devices with the efficiency of someone who had been preparing for this moment for 20 years. The London contact is in position. The Tokyo researcher has submitted Edgar's energy equations to 3 major scientific journals simultaneously. Once we trigger the release, there will be no stopping the information flow. Maya pressed play on Edgar's recording device, listening once more to the voice of a man who had known he was about to die. "My name is Edgar Thompson, and if you're hearing this, then Harrison Industries has probably killed me. For 23 years, I've been developing technology that could provide clean, unlimited energy to the world. For 23 years, powerful corporations have tried to stop me through legal manipulation, financial pressure, and ultimately murder." Edgar's voice was calm, methodical, as he detailed names, dates, and financial transactions that proved a conspiracy spanning decades. The recording contained enough evidence to bring down not just Harrison Industries, but an entire network of corporations, government officials, and private contractors who had worked together to suppress revolutionary technology. The atmospheric energy conversion device works by creating a resonance chamber that amplifies and focuses the natural electrical field present in our atmosphere. The technology requires no fuel, produces no pollution, and could be manufactured for less than the cost of a household appliance. The only reason this technology isn't powering homes and businesses around the world is because certain people have decided that their profits are more important than humanity's future. Maya paused the recording as her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but she had been expecting this call. "Ms. Rodriguez, "This is Michael Harrison." The voice was smooth, cultured, carrying the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. "I believe we need to meet. I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Harrison. On the contrary, you have something that belongs to me. My family's partnership agreement with Edgar Thompson gives me legal ownership of his atmospheric energy technology. You're currently in possession of stolen intellectual property." Maya looked at Mrs. Chen, who nodded grimly. They had known Harrison would make one final attempt to claim Edgar's work before they could release it publicly. "Your family tried to suppress Edgar's technology for 20 years, Maya said. "You murdered him to prevent it from reaching the public." Harrison's laugh was cold. "Edgar died of a heart attack, Ms. Rodriguez. A tragic but natural death. As for suppression, I prefer to think of it as responsible technology management. Some discoveries are too dangerous for immediate public release. Too dangerous for your profit margins. You mean, meet me at Edgar's garage in 1 hour, and we can discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. Bring Edgar's research materials, and I'll ensure you and your husband receive a substantial financial settlement. Refuse, and I'll be forced to recover my property through less pleasant means." The line went dead. Jake looked up from his monitoring station. "All contacts are in position. We can trigger the global release in 30 minutes. Mrs. Chen checked her watch. "My daughter's FBI team is ready to move on Harrison's offices and residences simultaneously. Once the arrests begin, Harrison won't be able to coordinate a response." Maya stared at the recording device, thinking about Edgar Thompson alone in his garage, fighting a battle against impossible odds. "He's expecting us to bring everything to the garage. He probably has a team waiting there. Then we don't go to the garage," Jake said. "We trigger the release from here and let the FBI handle Harrison." But Maya was studying Edgar's operational plan, noting details that everyone else had missed. "No, we have to go. Look at this." Edgar installed a broadcasting system in the garage, something powerful enough to transmit his technology specifications to contacts worldwide simultaneously. "We need physical access to that system to complete the release." Mrs. Chen examined the technical specifications Edgar had hidden in his plans. "He's right. Edgar created a redundant broadcast system as backup in case digital communications were compromised. The garage is the key to ensuring global distribution." Maya felt the weight of Edgar's legacy pressing down on her. The man had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, anticipating every possible obstacle and creating solutions for problems he hoped never to face. Going to the garage meant walking into Harrison's trap, but avoiding it meant potentially failing to complete Edgar's work. "We go," Maya decided. "But we don't go alone, and we don't go unprepared." Mrs. Chen was already activating emergency protocols on her communication system. "I'm alerting all contacts to begin preliminary release. If something happens to us at the garage, the information will still reach the public." Jake downloaded Edgar's complete technical specifications onto multiple backup drives, creating redundant copies that could be distributed even if the primary release system failed. If Harrison wants Edgar's technology, he's going to have to explain to the world why he killed a man to suppress clean energy. As they prepared to leave for what might be their final confrontation with Harrison Industries, Maya realized that Edgar Thompson's story was about to end the way he had always intended, not with his defeat, but with the triumph of truth over corporate power. The recording device in her hands contained enough evidence to destroy Harrison's empire, but more importantly, it contained Edgar's gift to humanity, technology that could transform civilization. Whether they survived the next few hours or not, Edgar Thompson's atmospheric energy converter was about to change the world forever. 6 months later, Maya stood in the transformed garage that had once housed Edgar Thompson's hidden laboratory, watching as the first production model atmospheric energy converters rolled off an assembly line that Edgar had dreamed of but never lived to see. The building buzzed with activity as engineers, technicians, and quality control specialists worked to fulfill orders that were arriving faster than they could process them. Jake emerged from what had once been Edgar's secret workshop, now expanded into a full research and development facility. His hands were stained with machine oil, but his face carried the satisfaction of someone who had found his true calling. "The efficiency ratings are even better than Edgar projected," he reported. "We're getting sustained output of 6.2 kilowatts from the residential units. The transformation hadn't been easy." Harrison's arrest had triggered a legal battle that lasted 3 months, with energy corporations fighting desperately to prevent Edgar's technology from reaching the market. But Edgar's meticulous documentation and the FBI's investigation had exposed a conspiracy so extensive that public outrage had made suppression impossible. Maya walked to the wall, where Edgar's original blueprint still hung, now framed and protected behind glass like the historical artifacts they had become. Detective Rivera approached, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had finally closed a case that had haunted her for years. "The last of Harrison's co-conspirators was sentenced yesterday," Rivera reported. 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, plus additional charges for technology suppression and corporate fraud. Harrison himself got life without parole. Maya nodded, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice for Edgar had come too late to save him, but at least his killers would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Any word on the other researchers? The ones who were working on similar technology. 3 of them have come forward now that it's safe. Turns out Edgar wasn't the only one who had figured out atmospheric energy conversion. The suppression network had been tracking and eliminating independent researchers for decades. Rivera shook her head. "Makes you wonder how much farther advanced we'd be if these corporations hadn't been so determined to protect their profits." Mrs. Chen entered from the administrative offices, carrying a stack of patent applications that represented the legal foundation for Edgar's technology becoming public domain. At 73, she had proven surprisingly adept at managing the complex business and legal challenges of bringing revolutionary technology to market. "The United Nations vote was unanimous," she announced with quiet pride. "Edgar's atmospheric energy technology has been declared a global public resource. No single corporation or nation can claim exclusive rights to it." Maya smiled, remembering Edgar's final letter and his insistence that his technology serve humanity rather than enrich powerful interests. The UN declaration meant that anyone, anywhere in the world, could manufacture atmospheric energy converters using Edgar's specifications. Within a decade, energy poverty could become a historical footnote. Jake was examining a new prototype when a young woman approached, carrying a tablet and wearing the excited expression of someone with good news to share. Dr. Sarah Kim from Stanford had become a regular visitor to the facility, helping to refine Edgar's designs and develop applications Edgar had never imagined. "The environmental impact projections are remarkable," Dr. Kim reported. "If atmospheric energy adoption continues at current rates, global carbon emissions could drop by 60% within 10 years. We're looking at the fastest energy transition in human history." Maya thought about Edgar Thompson, alone in this garage for 20 years, working on technology that corporate interests insisted was too dangerous to develop. His atmospheric energy converters were now being manufactured in 12 countries, powering homes and businesses without producing a single gram of pollution or requiring a single drop of fuel. The wall display that had once shown Edgar's lonely struggle against corporate suppression now tracked global deployment of his technology. Red dots marked manufacturing facilities, green dots showed operational installations, and blue dots indicated planned projects. The map looked like a constellation of progress, each light representing communities gaining access to clean, unlimited energy. Maya's phone chimed with a message from the Thompson Foundation, the organization she and Jake had established to manage Edgar's legacy and ensure his technology remained accessible to everyone. The Foundation's latest project involved bringing atmospheric energy converters to remote villages in developing countries, places where traditional power infrastructure had never reached. "Mrs. Chen," Maya said, "Edgar would be proud of what we've accomplished." The elderly woman smiled, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of a promise kept. Edgar always believed that technology should serve people, not the other way around. "What we've built here isn't just about energy. It's about proving that ordinary people can triumph over powerful interests when they're willing to fight for what's right." Jake joined them at the window overlooking the assembly floor, where workers installed the final components in another batch of atmospheric energy converters destined for homes and businesses around the world. Each device represented Edgar's vision made reality: clean energy available to everyone, regardless of wealth or geographic location. "The patent filing is complete," Jake announced, holding up the document that would officially release Edgar's technology to the public domain. The new patent application bore Edgar's name as primary inventor, with Maya and Jake listed as executors of his estate. As of today, anyone in the world can access Edgar's complete specifications and begin manufacturing atmospheric energy converters. Maya took the patent document, noting how Edgar's careful handwriting had been preserved in the technical drawings. His signature appeared on every page, a reminder that genius and persistence could overcome even the most powerful opposition. The document in her hands wasn't just a patent. It was Edgar Thompson's gift to humanity, finally delivered after decades of suppression. As the sun set over the industrial district that had once seemed so abandoned and hopeless, Maya realized that Edgar's story had ended exactly as he had intended. His atmospheric energy technology was transforming the world, his killers were in prison, and his legacy would benefit generations yet to be born. The garage that had hidden Edgar's secret for so many years now stood as a beacon of hope, proving that some discoveries are too important to suppress, and some truths are too powerful to silence. Edgar Thompson had changed the world from this humble building, and now that world would never be the same. The boardroom of Harrison Industries felt like a mausoleum as Maya walked through its marble corridors for the first time. Federal agents had sealed the building for months during the investigation, and now that the legal proceedings were complete, she and Jake had been granted access to Michael Harrison's private files as part of the asset recovery process. Detective Rivera led them through the executive suite, past portraits of Harrison family patriarchs who had built their fortune on oil and coal. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that Edgar's atmospheric energy technology would eventually make these fossil fuel empires obsolete. Harrison kept meticulous records, Rivera explained, opening the door to what had been Michael Harrison's private office. His paranoia about maintaining control led him to document everything, including evidence that ultimately convicted him. The office was a monument to corporate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, leather furniture that probably cost more than Maya and Jake's annual rent, and walls lined with awards from energy industry organizations. But it was the wall safe behind Harrison's desk that held the most significant discoveries. Inside the safe, Maya found a collection that made her stomach turn. Photographs of Edgar Thompson taken with telephoto lenses, surveillance reports detailing his daily routines, and psychological profiles prepared by corporate security consultants. Harrison had been stalking Edgar for years, learning his habits and vulnerabilities in preparation for the final assassination. But the most disturbing item was a leather-bound journal in Harrison's own handwriting. The entries revealed a man who had convinced himself that suppressing revolutionary technology was a patriotic duty, that preventing atmospheric energy development was necessary to preserve American economic stability. June 15th, Maya read aloud from one entry. "Thompson refuses all reasonable offers. His stubbornness threatens the entire energy sector. Discussed permanent solutions with Executive Solutions team. Sometimes progress requires difficult decisions." Jake was examining financial records that showed the true scope of the suppression network. Maya, look at these payment schedules. Harrison wasn't just targeting Edgar. They were funding a global campaign against atmospheric energy research. Universities that fired researchers, journals that rejected papers, even accidents that eliminated key scientists. Rivera pointed to a map on Harrison's wall, marked with red pins, indicating locations where atmospheric energy researchers had met suspicious ends. We counted at least 17 researchers worldwide who died under questionable circumstances. Edgar was just the most recent. Maya found herself studying a psychological evaluation of Edgar that Harrison had commissioned 3 years before the murder. The report described Edgar as brilliant but isolated, driven by messianic belief in his technology's importance, unlikely to abandon his work regardless of financial incentives or personal threats. The clinical language couldn't disguise what was essentially a death warrant. Harrison's consultants had determined that Edgar Thompson could not be bought, intimidated, or reasoned with, leaving elimination as the only viable option for protecting Harrison Industries' market position. "Here's something interesting," Jake called from Harrison's computer terminal. He kept digital copies of all correspondence with other energy executives. "There's a whole network of companies coordinating suppression activities. The email threads revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond Harrison Industries. CEOs of major oil companies, coal mining executives, even nuclear power advocates had worked together to prevent atmospheric energy technology from reaching the market. The coordination was sophisticated, involving shared intelligence about researchers, coordinated legal challenges to patent applications, and systematic defunding of university programs that got too close to breakthrough discoveries. Maya opened another file folder and found something that made her heart race. Detailed plans for suppressing Edgar's technology even after his death. Harrison had anticipated that Edgar might have hidden backup copies of his research, and had prepared strategies for containing any posthumous release of information. They had contingency plans for everything, Maya said, reading through documents that outlined media manipulation strategies, legal challenges to Edgar's estate, and even plans to discredit Maya and Jake as unreliable inheritors who had misunderstood Edgar's work. Rivera examined a timeline Harrison had created tracking Edgar's final months. Harrison knew Edgar suspected he was being poisoned. "Look at this. Surveillance reports noting Edgar's increased security measures, his visits to Mrs. Chen, even his trip to the bank to update his safety deposit box." The timeline showed that Harrison had been monitoring Edgar's every move right up until the assassination. The polonium poisoning had been timed to coincide with Edgar's planned disclosure to a Washington Post journalist, preventing the story from breaking while Edgar was still alive to provide. Evidence Jake discovered financial records showing payments to a company called Strategic Information Management for something, labeled Narrative Control Services. The amounts were staggering, tens of millions of dollars spent on what appeared to be a sophisticated disinformation campaign designed to discredit atmospheric energy research and its advocates. They weren't just suppressing the technology, Jake realized. They were actively convincing the public that it was impossible. Academic papers debunking atmospheric energy, media stories ridiculing researchers as crackpots, even fake scientific studies proving the technology couldn't work. Maya found correspondence between Harrison and government officials that revealed the full extent of regulatory capture. Energy industry executives had essentially written the policies that governed new technology approval, ensuring that revolutionary innovations like Edgar's atmospheric energy converter would face insurmountable bureaucratic obstacles. But the most chilling discovery was Harrison's personal diary, hidden in a locked drawer of his desk. The entries revealed a man who had gradually transformed from a successful businessman into something approaching a sociopath, convinced that protecting his family's energy empire justified any action. including murder. September 3rd, Maya read from a recent entry. Thompson's technology represents an existential threat, not just to our company, but to the entire established order. If atmospheric energy becomes viable, centuries of energy infrastructure become worthless overnight. Billions of people depend on the current system for their livelihoods. Sometimes preserving stability requires eliminating destabilizing influences. Rivera collected the journals and files that would serve as evidence in additional prosecutions. Harrison wasn't working alone. These documents implicate at least 12 other executives in conspiracy charges. The Justice Department is preparing a massive case against the entire suppression network. As they prepared to leave Harrison's office, Maya took one last look around the space where so much evil had been planned and coordinated. The wealth and power that surrounded her represented everything Edgar Thompson had been fighting against: the concentration of resources in the hands of people who valued profit over human welfare. But Harrison's meticulous record-keeping had ultimately provided the evidence needed to destroy the conspiracy he had worked so hard to protect. His paranoia about maintaining control had created a complete documentary record of crimes spanning decades, ensuring that his victims would finally receive justice. Walking out of Harrison Industries for the last time, Maya realized that Edgar Thompson's victory was complete. Not only had his technology reached the world, but the network of criminals who had suppressed it for so long was finally facing the consequences of their actions. Maya never expected to find herself testifying before a congressional subcommittee, but 6 weeks after discovering Harrison's files, she sat in the witness chair, facing a panel of senators whose questions would shape the future of energy regulation in America. The hearing room buzzed with reporters, lobbyists, and executives whose empires hung in the balance of her testimony. Senator Patricia Walsh, the subcommittee chair, leaned forward with the intensity of someone who had spent decades fighting corporate corruption. "Mrs. Thompson, you've provided this committee with evidence of a conspiracy that spans multiple administrations and involves some of the most powerful corporations in America. Can you walk us through what you discovered in Michael Harrison's files?" Maya glanced at Jake, who sat in the gallery behind her, then at Mrs. Chen, whose daughter, Agent Lisa Chen, had coordinated the FBI's investigation into the suppression network. The weight of Edgar's legacy pressed down on her as she prepared to expose decades of criminal behavior to the world. Senator Walsh, what we found was a systematic campaign to suppress revolutionary energy technology that could have transformed our economy and environment 20 years ago. Edgar Thompson's atmospheric energy converter wasn't just theoretical, it was a working technology that Harrison Industries and their partners spent hundreds of millions of dollars to bury. She opened the folder containing copies of Harrison's most damaging documents. Michael Harrison maintained detailed records of payments to what he called strategic information management companies. These organizations were essentially disinformation factories, creating fake scientific studies that debunked atmospheric energy research and coordinating media campaigns to ridicule scientists who got too close to breakthrough discoveries. Senator Robert Martinez, a former prosecutor known for his aggressive questioning style, interrupted. "Mrs. Thompson, these are serious allegations. You're claiming that major American corporations engaged in a decades-long conspiracy to suppress clean energy technology." "I'm not claiming it, Senator. I'm documenting it with Michael Harrison's own records." Maya held up a thick binder. "These files contain email correspondence between energy executives coordinating their suppression activities, financial records showing payments to private security companies for technology containment services, and detailed plans for eliminating researchers who refuse to abandon their work." The hearing room erupted in whispered conversations as photographers captured Maya, holding evidence that would reshape public understanding of corporate power and technological suppression. Senator Walsh called for order, but the damage was done. The story would dominate news cycles for weeks. Maya continued reading from Harrison's files. In 2019, Harrison Industries paid Executive Solutions $3.7 million for what their invoice describes as permanent technology containment regarding E. Thompson research project. 3 months later, Edgar Thompson was dead from polonium poisoning. Senator James Crawford, whose campaign had received substantial donations from energy companies, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mrs. Thompson, how can we verify that these documents are authentic? Corporate espionage and document forgery are common tactics used by activists seeking to damage legitimate businesses. Before Maya could respond, Agent Lisa Chen approached the witness table carrying a sealed evidence bag. Senator Crawford, the FBI has verified the authenticity of every document Mrs. Thompson has presented. We've also arrested 14 individuals in connection with this conspiracy, including executives from 6 major energy corporations. The revelation that arrests were already underway sent shockwaves through the hearing room. Maya watched as several men in expensive suits hurried toward the exits, presumably to warn their employers that the FBI investigation had expanded far beyond Harrison Industries. Senator Walsh studied a document that Agent Chen had provided. Agent Chen, this appears to be a communication between Harrison Industries and the Department of Energy regarding patent applications for atmospheric energy technology. Can you explain what we're looking at? Senator, that's evidence of regulatory capture. Energy industry executives essentially wrote the policies that governed new technology approval, ensuring that innovations like Mr. Thompson's atmospheric energy converter would face insurmountable bureaucratic obstacles. Patent applications were denied based on criteria that the applicants themselves could never access or challenge. Maya felt a surge of vindication as the full scope of Edgar's persecution became clear to the senators and the watching public. Edgar Thompson wasn't just fighting corporate greed, she said. He was fighting a system that had been designed specifically to prevent people like him from succeeding. Senator Martinez leaned back in his chair, clearly overwhelmed by the evidence. Mrs. Thompson, in your opinion, how much environmental damage could have been prevented if Edgar Thompson's technology had been allowed to develop naturally 20 years ago? Maya had been preparing for this question since the hearings were announced. Senator, our environmental consultants estimate that widespread adoption of atmospheric energy technology beginning in 2000 could have prevented approximately 40% of the carbon emissions that have occurred since then. We're talking about potentially avoiding the worst effects of climate change through the suppression of one man's invention. The hearing room fell silent as the full implications of Edgar's suppressed technology became clear. Decades of environmental destruction, thousands of deaths from air pollution, and trillions of dollars in climate damage, all potentially avoidable if Edgar Thompson's atmospheric energy converter had been allowed to reach the market. Senator Walsh gathered her papers with the decisive movements of someone preparing for legislative battle. Mrs. Thompson, this committee will be recommending criminal investigations into every corporation and individual involved in suppressing Edgar Thompson's technology. We will also be proposing new legislation to prevent this kind of technological suppression from ever happening again. As Maya left the witness stand, she felt Edgar's presence more strongly than she had since the day they first opened his hidden crate. His 20-year battle against corporate corruption had finally reached its conclusion, not in his lonely garage laboratory, but in the halls of Congress, where the American people's representatives were demanding justice for his murder and vindication for his suppressed discoveries. The atmospheric energy revolution that Edgar had dreamed of was no longer just a technological transformation. It had become a political reckoning that would reshape the relationship between corporate power and public welfare for generations to come. Edgar Thompson's legacy would be measured not just in the clean energy his technology provided, but in the democratic reforms his persecution had inspired. The phone call came at 3 in the morning, jerking Maya from a restless sleep filled with dreams of congressional hearings and corporate boardrooms. The caller ID showed an international number she didn't recognize, but something compelled her to answer despite the hour. Maya Rodriguez? The voice was female, elderly, with a slight accent that sounded European. My name is Dr. Elena Volkov. I was Edgar Thompson's colleague 40 years ago, before the corporations forced us apart. I've been watching the news coverage of your testimony. Maya sat up in bed, instantly alert. Jake stirred beside her but didn't wake. Dr. Volkov? Edgar never mentioned you in his files. Of course not. I disappeared from atmospheric energy research in 1985 when my family was threatened. I've been hiding in plain sight ever since, working as a physics professor in Prague while secretly continuing Edgar's work. Dr. Volkov paused, and Maya could hear the weight of decades of secrecy in her voice. But your congressional testimony has changed everything. It's finally safe for me to reveal what I've been protecting. Maya grabbed a notebook from her nightstand. What have you been protecting? The complete theoretical foundation for atmospheric energy technology. Edgar and I developed the mathematics together in the early 1980s, but when Harrison Industries began their suppression campaign, we agreed to separate our research. Edgar kept the practical applications and prototypes. I took the underlying physics and mathematical proofs. The implications hit Maya like lightning. You mean Edgar's technology is based on even more advanced theoretical work? Much more advanced. Edgar's atmospheric energy converter is just the beginning. The full mathematical framework shows how to scale the technology from household devices to city-wide power systems, even planetary-scale climate control systems. We're talking about technology that could reverse global warming within a decade. Maya's hands shook as she wrote down Dr. Volkov's words. Edgar's invention had already revolutionized energy production, but apparently that was only a fraction of what atmospheric energy technology could accomplish. Dr. Volkov, why are you contacting me now? Why not work directly with the scientific community? Because the suppression network is still active, even with Harrison in prison. I've been monitoring corporate communications since your testimony, and there are powerful interests preparing a counter-campaign to discredit Edgar's technology and prevent further development. Doctor. Volkov's voice carried the paranoia of someone who had spent decades hiding from corporate assassins. I have evidence that 3 atmospheric energy researchers have died under suspicious circumstances just in the past month. The network is trying to cut off the technology's development before it can reach its full potential. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the early morning air. What kind of evidence? Communications intercepts, financial records, surveillance reports. I've spent 40 years building an intelligence network of scientists, journalists, and government officials who monitor corporate suppression activities. What your testimony revealed publicly, we've been documenting privately for decades. The scale of Dr. Volkov's operation was staggering. Maya realized that Edgar's battle against corporate suppression had been part of a much larger war, with hidden allies working in secret to preserve revolutionary technology and document the crimes committed to suppress it. Dr. Volkov, what do you want from me? I want to give you the complete theoretical framework for atmospheric energy technology, but I need guarantees that it will be protected and developed responsibly. Edgar trusted you with his practical applications. I'm hoping you'll prove worthy of the theoretical foundations as well. Maya looked at Jake, who had awakened and was listening to her side of the conversation with growing amazement. They had thought Edgar's atmospheric energy converter was the culmination of his life's work, but apparently it was just the opening chapter of a much larger story. Where are you now? Maya asked. Prague, but I'm prepared to travel to America if you can guarantee my safety. The FBI investigation has disrupted the suppression network temporarily, but these organizations have resources and patience that extend far beyond any single government prosecution. Maya thought about Agent Lisa Chen and the ongoing federal investigation into the energy industry conspiracy. Dr. Volkov, I think we can arrange protection through the FBI. Agent Chen has been working on this case for years. Lisa Chen. Yes, I've been in contact with her mother, Mrs. Chen, for decades. She's been one of my few trusted contacts in America. If Lisa can provide protection, I'm willing to risk exposure. The revelation that Dr. Volkov had been secretly coordinating with Mrs. Chen added another layer to the complex network Edgar had helped create. Maya began to understand that Edgar Thompson's garage had been just one node in a global resistance movement working to preserve revolutionary technology against corporate suppression. Dr. Volkov, how many other researchers are out there? How many other technologies have been suppressed? Atmospheric energy is just one of 7 major technological breakthroughs that have been systematically suppressed over the past 50 years. Room temperature superconductors, quantum computing advances, medical technologies that could eliminate major diseases, all buried by corporations that profit from maintaining technological scarcity. Maya felt overwhelmed by the scope of technological suppression. Dr. Volkov was describing. Edgar's atmospheric energy converter was part of a pattern of innovation that could have transformed human civilization decades ago, if not for the systematic efforts of powerful interests to maintain profitable limitations. I have complete documentation for all 7 suppressed technologies, Dr. Volkov continued. Mathematical proofs, experimental data, even prototype designs that were stolen or destroyed by corporate security teams. Your congressional testimony has created a window of opportunity to release this information while the suppression network is disrupted. Maya realized that Edgar Thompson's legacy was about to expand far beyond atmospheric energy. Dr. Volkov was offering to expose an entire system of technological suppression that had held back human progress for half a century. Dr. Volkov, if we do this, if we release all 7 technologies simultaneously, what kind of resistance should we expect? The kind that killed Edgar Thompson, Dr. Volkov replied grimly, but also the kind that can be overcome if we move quickly and coordinate globally. The suppression network's power depends on secrecy and isolation. Massive, simultaneous disclosure could overwhelm their ability to contain the information. As Maya scheduled a secure meeting with Dr. Volkov and Agent Chen, she realized that Edgar Thompson's atmospheric energy converter had been just the beginning of a technological revolution that could reshape human civilization. The question now was whether they could survive long enough to complete what Edgar had started. The secure meeting location Agent Chen had arranged was a safe house in the Virginia countryside, far from the corporate surveillance networks that had monitored Edgar's every move during his final years. Maya and Jake arrived to find Dr. Elena Volkov waiting in the living room, a slight woman in her 70s whose sharp eyes betrayed the brilliant mind that had helped develop atmospheric energy theory 4 decades earlier. Spread across the coffee table were documents that looked like they belonged in a science fiction novel rather than a physicist's research files. Mathematical equations covered pages with the kind of elegant complexity that suggested fundamental discoveries about how the universe operated at its most basic level. These are the original theoretical proofs Edgar and I developed together, Dr. Volkov explained, her accent more pronounced in person than it had been over the phone. We understood even then that atmospheric energy conversion was just one application of a much larger principle governing energy extraction from quantum field fluctuations. Agent Chen studied the equations with the focused attention of someone who had spent years investigating crimes that existed at the intersection of advanced science and corporate greed. Dr. Volkov, our investigation has confirmed that at least 14 researchers working on similar theories have died under suspicious circumstances since 1980. How did you manage to survive when so many others didn't? Dr. Volkov smiled grimly. By becoming invisible. I published nothing, patented nothing, and taught only basic undergraduate physics courses that pose no threat to anyone's profit margins. But I never stopped working, never stopped documenting, and never stopped preparing for the day when it would be safe to reveal what Edgar and I had discovered. Meyer examined a diagram that showed energy extraction principles far more sophisticated than anything in Edgar's garage files. Dr. Volkov, you said there were 6 other suppressed technologies. What are they? The elderly physicist moved to a locked briefcase and withdrew folders marked with different scientific disciplines. Room temperature superconductors that would revolutionize electronics and transportation. Quantum computing algorithms that would make current encryption obsolete. Medical nanotechnology that could repair cellular damage and effectively eliminate aging. Material science breakthroughs that would enable space elevators and orbital manufacturing. Energy storage systems that would make current battery technology look like primitive toys. Each folder contained documentation that would normally take years to develop and verify. But Dr. Volkov had spent 4 decades collecting and organizing suppressed research from around the world. A hidden network of scientists had preserved breakthrough discoveries that corporate interests had tried to bury permanently. Jake studied a materials science document that described carbon lattice structures with properties that seemed impossible. Dr. Volkov, if these technologies had been developed normally, how advanced would human civilization be today? We would have eliminated poverty, disease, and environmental degradation by the year 2000, Dr. Volkov said matter-of-factly. We would have colonies throughout the solar system, indefinite human lifespans, and energy systems that could support trillions of people without environmental impact. The current state of human civilization is approximately 50 years behind where it should be. Agent Chen was photographing documents that detailed the suppression network's methods and targets. Dr. Volkov, this intelligence network you've built, how many people are involved? Approximately 300 researchers, journalists, and government officials across 47 countries. We've been documenting corporate suppression activities since the 1980s, creating a complete record of technological sabotage that spans multiple industries and governments. Meyer felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Dr. Volkov was revealing. Edgar Thompson's murder had been part of a systematic campaign to prevent human civilization from advancing beyond artificial limitations imposed by profit-driven corporations. The atmospheric energy technology you inherited from Edgar is the key to releasing all the other suppressed innovations, Dr. Volkov continued. Once cheap, unlimited energy becomes available, the economic models that justify suppressing other technologies collapse completely. She opened a final folder containing what appeared to be a coordinated release plan similar to Edgar's final operation, but on a global scale. My network has been preparing for simultaneous disclosure of all 7 suppressed technologies. Your congressional testimony created the political environment that makes such disclosure feasible. Agent Chen studied the release plan with professional interest. Dr. Volkov, this would essentially trigger a technological revolution overnight. The economic and social disruption would be enormous, less enormous than continuing to suppress technologies that could solve humanity's greatest challenges, Dr. Volkov replied. Climate change, resource scarcity, disease, poverty, all of these problems have technological solutions that have been deliberately buried to protect existing profit structures. Meyer realized that Dr. Volkov was offering them a choice, similar to the one Edgar had presented in his final letter, but on a vastly larger scale. They could release Edgar's atmospheric energy technology and allow gradual change, or they could participate in exposing the entire system of technological suppression and trigger rapid transformation of human civilization. Dr. Volkov, what happened to your family? You mentioned they were threatened in 1985. The elderly physicist's expression grew pained. My husband was a researcher at MIT working on quantum computing applications. He died in a laboratory accident that the insurance company ruled suspicious, but the police dismissed as human error. My daughter received death threats when she began following in her father's footsteps. I made the choice to disappear rather than watch my family destroyed piece by piece. Jake examined Dr. Volkov's intelligence files, noting the meticulous documentation of corporate crimes spanning decades. Dr. Volkov, why did you wait so long to reveal this information? You could have exposed the suppression network years ago, because exposing the network without providing viable alternatives would have accomplished nothing except getting more people killed. Edgar's atmospheric energy breakthrough was the missing piece, proof that suppressed technologies actually work and can be manufactured at scale. Without that proof, my documentation would have been dismissed as conspiracy theories. Agent Chen was already coordinating with her FBI contacts to provide protection for Dr. Volkov's global network of researchers. Dr. Volkov, if we proceed with simultaneous disclosure, how quickly can your people move? Within 72 hours, we can release complete documentation for all 7 suppressed technologies through academic journals, government agencies, and media outlets in every major country. The suppression network's ability to contain information depends on controlling limited channels of communication. Massive simultaneous disclosure would overwhelm their response capabilities. Maya looked at the documents spread across the table. Mathematical proofs that could revolutionize physics, engineering specifications that could eliminate scarcity, and medical research that could extend human lifespans indefinitely. Edgar Thompson's atmospheric energy converter had opened a door to possibilities that extended far beyond clean energy. Dr. Volkov, Maya said finally, Edgar trusted me to complete his work. I think he would want me to help you complete yours as well. The elderly physicist smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had waited 4 decades for this moment. Then we begin tomorrow. 40 years of suppressed human progress is about to be unleashed on a world that's ready for transformation. The coordinated global disclosure began at exactly midnight GMT, with Dr. Volkov's network releasing suppressed technology documentation simultaneously across 6 continents. Maya watched from the Virginia safe house as news alerts flooded her phone, each notification representing another piece of forbidden knowledge reaching the public for the first time in decades. Tokyo University has confirmed the room temperature superconductor formulations. Jake reported, monitoring news feeds on his laptop. MIT is independently verifying the quantum computing algorithms. The European Space Agency is reviewing the materials science specifications for space elevator construction. Dr. Volkov sat calmly in the center of the technological storm she had unleashed, coordinating with her global network through encrypted communications that had taken 40 years to establish. Each contact represented a researcher who had risked their career and sometimes their life to preserve revolutionary discoveries. From corporate suppression, the medical nanotechnology, documentation has been delivered to the World Health Organization, she announced. Dr. Sarah Kim at Stanford is preparing independent verification of the cellular repair protocols. If the technology works as documented, we're looking at the effective elimination of aging and most diseases within a decade. Maya felt dizzy trying to comprehend the implications of what they had set in motion. 7 suppressed technologies, each capable of transforming human civilization, were being revealed simultaneously to a world that had been artificially limited for 50 years. Agent Chen burst through the safe house door, her face flushed with excitement and concern. Dr. Volkov, the response has been immediate and massive. 3 major energy corporations have lost 40% of their stock value in the past 6 hours. The Pentagon is demanding briefings on the quantum computing disclosures. The pharmaceutical industry is in complete chaos, but it was Dr. Volkov's secure communication device that delivered the most significant news. A message from her contact at the United Nations read, "Secretary General calling emergency session. 7 member nations requesting immediate technology transfer agreements. World Bank projecting complete restructuring of global economy within 18 months. It's working," Dr. Volkov said with quiet satisfaction. The simultaneous disclosure is overwhelming the suppression network's ability to contain the information. They can't buy off or eliminate hundreds of researchers across dozens of countries all at once. Maya studied the flood of news reports covering the technology releases. "Dr. Volkov, what about the people whose industries are being made obsolete? They're not going to accept this quietly." As if summoned by Maya's concern, Agent Chen's phone rang with an urgent call from FBI headquarters. The conversation was brief but alarming, and Chen's expression grew grim as she listened to her supervisor's report. "Emergency security briefing in 1 hour," Chen announced. "Harrison Industries and 6 other major corporations have formed what they're calling a Technological Stability Council. They're claiming the technology releases constitute a threat to national security and economic stability." Dr. Volkov had anticipated this response. From her briefcase, she withdrew a thick folder labeled Corporate Counter-Response Protocols. The suppression network always plays the national security card when they can't control information through normal channels. They'll claim the technology releases enable terrorism, threaten American competitiveness, or undermine strategic advantages. Jake was monitoring corporate communications through channels Dr. Volkov's network had established. 3 oil company CEOs are demanding congressional hearings to investigate the irresponsible disclosure of sensitive technologies. They're claiming the releases violate export control laws and patent protections, but the corporate resistance was meeting an unprecedented level of public and scientific support. Maya watched as Nobel Prize winners, university presidents, and research institutions around the world endorsed the technology releases and demanded full disclosure of any suppression activities. "Look at this," Maya said, reading from a joint statement signed by 200 scientists. "They're calling for immediate investigation of technological suppression and demanding that all 7 technologies be placed in the public domain to prevent future corporate control." Dr. Volkov's communication device chimed with updates from contacts around the world. Beijing is announcing a national program to develop all 7 technologies. The European Union is establishing a joint research initiative. India is offering asylum to any researchers threatened by corporate retaliation. The global response was creating a technological arms race. But instead of nations competing to develop weapons, they were racing to implement life-saving and civilization-advancing innovations that had been suppressed for decades. Agent Chen returned from her emergency briefing with news that would reshape the final phase of their disclosure operation. The Justice Department is expanding the Harrison Industries investigation to include all members of the Technological Stability Council. They're treating the suppression network as a criminal conspiracy that violated antitrust laws, committed fraud, and engaged in conspiracy to commit murder. Maya felt a surge of vindication for Edgar Thompson, whose lonely battle against corporate suppression had evolved into a global movement for technological liberation. Dr. Volkov, Edgar would be amazed to see what his atmospheric energy discovery has unleashed. Edgar always understood that atmospheric energy was about more than clean power. Dr. Volkov replied. It was about proving that artificial scarcity is a choice, not a natural law. Once people understand that revolutionary technologies have been deliberately suppressed, they begin questioning what other limitations are artificially imposed rather than naturally inevitable. The elderly physicist activated a final protocol on her communication system. sending coordinates and access codes to hidden research facilities around the world. Phase 2 begins now. My network has been preserving not just documentation, but working prototypes of suppressed technologies. Within 48 hours, functional demonstrations will begin simultaneously across 6 continents. Maya realized that Dr. Volkov's disclosure was even more comprehensive than Edgar's had been. And electronics. The demonstrations are synchronized across all time zones. As we broadcast the atmospheric energy technology, 46 other facilities will simultaneously demonstrate superconductors, quantum computers, medical nanotechnology, advanced materials, and energy storage systems. Agent Chen monitored security feeds showing federal agents and corporate security teams positioning themselves around the building. We have maybe 20 minutes before they breach the perimeter. After that, it's going to get complicated. Mrs. Chen activated the broadcast equipment from her position at the master control panel. Edgar spent 20 years dreaming of this moment, the day when his technology would reach every person on Earth simultaneously, making suppression impossible forever. The red light on camera 1 illuminated, and Maya began speaking to the largest audience in human history. Good morning. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I'm speaking to you today about technologies that could have transformed human civilization 50 years ago, but were deliberately suppressed by corporations that valued profit over human welfare. Behind me are working prototypes of 7 revolutionary technologies, including the atmospheric energy converter developed by Edgar Thompson, who was murdered to prevent this moment from happening. She held up Edgar's original prototype, the small device that could power a house indefinitely by extracting energy from the atmosphere. This device generates clean, unlimited energy without fuel, without pollution, and without depleting natural resources. The technology has been perfected for decades, but energy corporations have spent hundreds of millions of dollars to prevent you from knowing it exists. Around the world, Dr. Volkov's network began their synchronized demonstrations. In Switzerland, levitating vehicles powered by room-temperature superconductors transported passengers above traffic-clogged highways. In South Korea, quantum computers solved mathematical problems that would have taken conventional systems centuries to complete. In Canada, medical nanotechnology repaired damaged organs in live demonstrations that hospital observers called miraculous. The technology you're witnessing today represents 50 years of suppressed human progress. Maya continued. Climate change, energy poverty, transportation limitations, medical conditions that kill millions of people annually, all of these challenges have technological solutions that were developed decades ago and then buried to protect existing profit structures. Dr. Volkov stepped forward to address the global audience directly. I am Dr. Elena Volkov, and for 40 years I have preserved the theoretical foundations for these technologies while documenting the criminal conspiracy that suppressed them. Today, I am releasing complete manufacturing specifications to the public domain, ensuring that no corporation can ever again claim exclusive ownership of innovations that belong to all humanity. The broadcast continued for 18 minutes, with each technology demonstrated in real time while Dr. Volkov and Maya explained the scientific principles and provided detailed construction specifications. Manufacturing plans, material lists, and assembly instructions were transmitted simultaneously through internet channels to universities, research institutions, and independent laboratories worldwide. The atmospheric energy converter requires materials that cost less than $50 and can be assembled by anyone with basic technical skills, Maya explained, holding components that viewers could obtain at electronics supply stores. The complete specifications are being uploaded to 10,000 websites simultaneously as we speak. Agent Chen's voice crackled through Maya's earpiece. Federal agents are breaching the building. 2 minutes to reach the broadcast floor. Maya looked directly into the camera for her final statement. Edgar Thompson died protecting these technologies from corporate suppression, but his death was not in vain. Today, the knowledge that powerful interests tried to bury has been released to every nation, every university, and every person with access to this broadcast. The age of artificial technological scarcity is over. The broadcast ended exactly as federal agents entered the studio. But the damage to the suppression network was already complete and irreversible. For 18 minutes, 5.1 billion people had witnessed technologies that would transform human civilization, and complete manufacturing specifications had been distributed through channels that no government or corporation could control. Dr. Volkov smiled as Agent Chen led her toward the federal agents who had come to arrest them. Edgar's atmospheric energy converter was just the beginning, she said. Humanity's real technological age starts today, Maya. Realized that Edgar Thompson's legacy had achieved something unprecedented in human history, the simultaneous liberation of half a century of suppressed innovation, delivered directly to the global population without corporate or government mediation. No amount of legal prosecution or corporate pressure could reverse what had just been accomplished. As federal agents placed her in handcuffs, Maya looked at the cameras that had carried Edgar's gift to the world and knew that their 18-minute broadcast would be remembered as the moment when artificial technological limitations ended forever. The federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. had never seen anything like the trial of Maya Rodriguez and Dr. Elena Volkov. Outside, supporters carrying signs reading, "Technology is a human right and Edgar Thompson lives on," maintained a peaceful vigil that had lasted 6 weeks. Inside, the most important legal battle in modern history was determining whether exposing suppressed technology constituted espionage or heroism. Maya sat at the defendant's table wearing the simple blue dress that had become symbolic of her resistance to corporate power. Beside her, Dr. Volkov reviewed documents with the calm confidence of someone who had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. Their legal team, led by civil rights attorney David Chen, no relation to Agent Chen, had structured their defense around a simple premise. Technological suppression was a crime against humanity, and exposing it was a moral obligation. Your Honor, Chen addressed Federal Judge Patricia Williams. The defendants stand accused of violating the Espionage Act by disclosing technologies that the prosecution claims threaten national security. But the evidence will show that these technologies were developed by American citizens, funded by American taxpayers, and then illegally suppressed by American corporations to protect their profit margins. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Webb, son of the same Marcus Webb who had threatened Maya months earlier, painted a different picture. Your Honor, the defendants recklessly disclosed sensitive technologies to hostile foreign powers, undermining decades of strategic American advantages and threatening the stability of critical infrastructure systems. But the trial's outcome had been determined not by legal arguments, but by the global transformation that had occurred since Maya's broadcast. In the 6 weeks since the technology disclosure, atmospheric energy converters were being manufactured in 47 countries. Room-temperature superconductors had revolutionized transportation systems worldwide, and medical nanotechnology had begun eliminating diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. Judge Williams reviewed the evidence with the careful attention of someone whose decision would establish legal precedent for technological disclosure cases. Mr. Chen, your clients have presented evidence that Edgar Thompson and other researchers were murdered to suppress these technologies. How does this affect the national security claims made by the prosecution? Jen approached the bench, carrying a thick folder of documents that Dr. Volkov's network had compiled over 4 decades. Your Honor, the evidence shows that the so-called national security concerns were manufactured by corporations seeking to protect their market positions. The real threat to American security was the systematic suppression of innovations that could have eliminated energy dependence. reduced environmental damage, and strengthened American technological leadership. Maya took the witness stand for her final testimony, looking out at a courtroom filled with scientists, journalists, and ordinary citizens whose lives had been transformed by Edgar's technology. Your Honor, Edgar Thompson spent 20 years trying to work within the system. He filed patent applications. He contacted government agencies. He followed every legal channel available to inventors seeking to benefit humanity with their discoveries. She paused, thinking of Edgar alone in his garage, fighting a battle against impossible odds. The system failed him. Patent applications were denied on fabricated grounds. Government officials ignored his communications, and when legal suppression failed, he was murdered. Edgar Thompson died because he refused to let revolutionary technology be buried to protect corporate profits. Dr. Volkov's testimony focused on the global network of suppressed technologies and the systematic campaign to eliminate researchers who threatened established industries. Your Honor, atmospheric energy conversion is just one of 7 major technological breakthroughs that have been deliberately suppressed over the past 50 years. The evidence shows a pattern of corporate conspiracy that has artificially limited human progress for half a century. The courtroom's attention shifted to Agent Lisa Chen, whose FBI investigation had uncovered the full scope of the suppression network. Where Edgar had hidden his technology in a single garage, Dr. Volkov had created a global network of hidden laboratories, preserving decades of suppressed innovation. Dr. Volkov, how many research facilities are you coordinating? 47 active laboratories across 32 countries, each specializing in different suppressed technologies. The room temperature superconductor lab in Switzerland, the quantum computing facility in South Korea, the medical nanotechnology research center in Canada, all preserved in secret, all ready to demonstrate that these technologies are not theoretical possibilities, but working realities. As news of the prototype demonstrations spread, Maya watched stock markets around the world react to the reality that human civilization was about to advance by 50 years almost overnight. Some industries collapsed as their products became obsolete, but new sectors emerged to develop and deploy the liberated technologies. The suppression network that had controlled technological development for half a century was crumbling under the weight of simultaneous disclosure across multiple fronts. Edgar Thompson's atmospheric energy breakthrough had provided the proof of concept that made global technological liberation possible. The attack came without warning at 4:17 a.m., 3 days after the global technology disclosure began. Maya woke to the sound of Agent Chen shouting commands into her radio, while the safe house's security system screamed warnings about perimeter breaches. Through the bedroom window, she could see armed figures in tactical gear surrounding the building. "Federal agents, stand down immediately." Chen's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to dangerous situations, but the response came in the form of flash-bang grenades exploding outside the windows. These weren't federal agents. They were private military contractors hired by the Technological Stability Council to contain the disclosure. By any means necessary, Jake grabbed the emergency bag they had prepared containing copies of Dr. Volkov's most critical files. "Maya, the basement exit, now!" Dr. Volkov moved with surprising agility for a woman in her 70s, snatching her communication device and the quantum computing specifications that represented 40 years of hidden research. "They're too late," she said with grim satisfaction. "The prototypes are already being demonstrated. Killing us won't stop what we've started." Agent Chen was coordinating with FBI backup while laying down covering fire toward the tactical team attempting to breach the front door. "These aren't government agents," she called over the sound of splintering wood. "Someone hired mercenaries to stop the disclosure." Maya and Jake followed Dr. Volkov through the basement corridor that led to an escape tunnel Agent Chen had shown them during their security briefing. The tunnel connected to a drainage system that would take them a quarter-mile from the safe house, but they could hear boots on the floors above as the attackers systematically searched each room. Dr. Volkov, Maya whispered as they crawled through the narrow tunnel. Your global network, are they under attack too? Unknown. The communication system was designed to function independently, even if individual nodes are compromised. Dr. Volkov's voice remained steady despite the circumstances. My researchers have been preparing for this possibility for decades. They emerged from the drainage system near a secondary safe house that Agent Chen had established as a backup location. But as they approached the building, Jake spotted vehicles that didn't belong to the FBI positioned around the perimeter. They found the backup location too, Jake said. Someone gave them our complete security plan. Agent Chen's radio crackled with devastating news. Chen, this is Director Morrison. Stand down immediately. The Technological Stability Council has obtained federal court orders classifying the disclosed technologies as matters of national security. Anyone distributing the information is subject to arrest under the Espionage Act. Maya felt the world shift around her. The same legal system that had failed to protect Edgar Thompson was now being weaponized against them by the corporations whose crimes they had exposed. Agent Chen, are you following orders to arrest us? Dr. Volkov asked with the calm of someone who had faced similar threats before. Chen stared at her radio for a long moment before switching it off and removing the battery. Not today. Edgar Thompson was murdered, and I'm not going to let his technology be buried. Again, by corrupt officials taking orders from corporate criminals. They needed transportation and a secure location to coordinate with Dr. Volkov's global network. But every safe house and official channel had been compromised. Maya realized they were experiencing what Edgar Thompson had faced during his final months, complete isolation from institutional support. Hunted by people with unlimited resources and government backing. Mrs. Chen, Maya said suddenly. Edgar's neighbor. She's been protecting secrets for 20 years. She'll help us. They found Mrs. Chen waiting for them at the address Dr. Volkov provided, her modest house transformed into a secure communication center that rivaled anything the FBI had established. Multiple computer terminals displayed status updates from research facilities around the world, while encrypted radio equipment maintained contact with scientists who had gone underground to continue their work. The demonstrations are proceeding on schedule, Mrs. Chen reported. The Swiss superconductor lab publicly demonstrated levitating transport vehicles this morning. The South Korean quantum computing facility cracked encryption systems that were supposed to be unbreakable for 50 years. The Canadian medical lab showed nanotechnology repairing damaged organs in real time. Dr. Volkov activated her primary communication device and began receiving status reports from her global network. 43 of 47 facilities remain operational. The attackers managed to shut down 4 labs, but the technology demonstrations have been recorded and distributed too widely to suppress. Maya watched news coverage of the prototype demonstrations on Mrs. Chen's wall-mounted displays. Despite the federal court orders and corporate pressure, universities and research institutions around the world were independently verifying and expanding on the disclosed technologies. They can't arrest every scientist on the planet, Jake observed. The technology is already spreading beyond their ability to control. Agent Chen was monitoring FBI communications despite her decision to disobey orders. The Justice Department is split. Half the department wants to prosecute us for espionage, but the other half is investigating the Technological Stability Council for conspiracy and murder. The Harrison Industries case has created a precedent for treating corporate suppression as criminal activity. Dr. Volkov smiled as her communication device displayed a message that changed everything. UN Security Council unanimous resolution declaring suppressed technologies global public resources. International law now protects disclosure and development. Corporate suppression activities classified as crimes against humanity. Maya felt a surge of triumph. that Edgar Thompson's lonely battle had evolved into international recognition that technological suppression was a crime against all humanity. The corporations that had murdered Edgar and threatened countless others were now facing global condemnation and legal consequences. "Dr. Volkov, what's our next move?" Maya asked. The elderly physicist was already coordinating the final phase of her 4-decade plan. "We go public. Complete disclosure, live demonstrations, and full documentation released simultaneously through channels the corporations can't control. Tomorrow morning, the world will see every suppressed technology working in real time." As Maya prepared for what might be their final confrontation with the suppression network, she realized that Edgar Thompson's atmospheric energy discovery had accomplished something far greater than he had ever imagined. It had triggered the liberation of 50 years of suppressed human progress and created a movement that no corporation or government could contain. This abandoned television studio in downtown Washington had been dark for 3 years, but Dr. Volkov's network had spent months preparing it for this moment. Professional broadcast equipment filled the main floor, while uplinks connected to satellite networks that would carry their transmission to every continent simultaneously. Maya stood before cameras that would broadcast the final revelation of Edgar Thompson's legacy to the world. 30 seconds to global transmission, announced Dr. Kim from Stanford, who had traveled across the country to coordinate the technical aspects of their unprecedented broadcast. "We have confirmed satellite coverage reaching 2.8 billion people directly, with secondary distribution through internet and social media, reaching an estimated 5.1 billion total viewers." Maya looked at the documents spread across the broadcast desk. Edgar's original atmospheric energy specifications, Dr. Volkov's theoretical proofs, and working prototypes of technologies that had been suppressed for half a century. In 30 seconds, corporate technological suppression would become impossible because the entire world would possess the knowledge that had been hidden. "Maya," Jake said from the control booth, "remember what Edgar wrote in his final letter. This isn't about us. This is about giving humanity the tools it needs to solve its greatest challenges." Dr. Volkov stood beside a working prototype of the room-temperature superconductor that would revolutionize transportation. "Honor, our investigation documented systematic violations of antitrust law, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud on a scale that affected global technological development. The defendants' actions exposed criminal behavior that had been hidden for decades, but it was the testimony of international observers that proved most compelling." Dr. Sarah Kim from Stanford described how atmospheric energy technology had eliminated energy poverty in developing nations. Within weeks of its disclosure, representatives from the United Nations explained how the liberated technologies were enabling solutions to climate change that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Judge Williams called for a brief recess, during which Maya watched news coverage of the global transformation still unfolding. Atmospheric energy converters were powering remote villages that had never had electricity. Superconductor-based transportation systems were reducing urban pollution to near zero levels. Medical nanotechnology was extending human lifespans and eliminating genetic diseases. "Whatever happens in this courtroom," Dr. Volkov said quietly, "Edgar's technology has already changed the world permanently." That was always the goal, not to avoid legal consequences, but to ensure that suppressed innovations reached humanity before they could be buried again. When court reconvened, Judge Williams delivered a decision that would reshape the legal framework governing technological disclosure. This court finds that the defendants acted in the public interest by exposing criminal suppression of technologies that could benefit all humanity. The Espionage Act was never intended to protect corporate profits at the expense of human welfare. The courtroom erupted in cheers as Maya and Dr. Volkov were acquitted of all charges. But Judge Williams wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court recommends that Congress investigate the systematic suppression of beneficial technologies and establish legal protections for researchers whose innovations threaten established corporate interests. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she realized that Edgar Thompson's battle had finally been won, not just in the marketplace of ideas, but in the halls of justice where corporate power had been forced to yield to human welfare. As they left the courthouse, surrounded by supporters celebrating the legal vindication of technological liberation, Maya understood that Edgar's legacy extended far beyond atmospheric energy conversion. He had proven that ordinary people could triumph over the most powerful corporate interests when they were willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. The trial was over, but the technological revolution Edgar had made possible was just beginning. 5 years after discovering Edgar Thompson's hidden treasure, Maya stood in the memorial garden that had been built on the site of his former garage. The building itself had been preserved as a monument to technological liberation, but the surrounding area had been transformed into a peaceful space where visitors could reflect on the cost of progress and the courage required to challenge entrenched power. The memorial's centerpiece was a working atmospheric energy converter, larger than Edgar's original prototype, but based on the same principles he had developed in solitude. The device powered the entire memorial complex while serving as a constant reminder that revolutionary technology belonged to humanity, not to corporations seeking to profit from artificial scarcity. Jake approached from the education center they had built adjacent to the memorial, carrying the latest enrollment reports for the Edgar Thompson Institute for Technological Liberation. 2,000 new students this semester, he reported with satisfaction. Engineers, scientists, and activists from 63 countries, all learning how to identify and counter technological suppression. Maya smiled as she watched children from a local school examining the atmospheric energy converter during their field trip. The technology that energy corporations had spent billions trying to suppress was now so commonplace that elementary students learned its basic principles alongside arithmetic and reading. Any word from Dr. Volkov? Maya asked. She's in Geneva advising the UN Technology Liberation Committee on their investigation into pharmaceutical suppression. Apparently, they've found evidence that cancer treatments and life extension technologies have been deliberately limited for the past 30 years. Maya wasn't surprised. Dr. Volkov's global network had continued expanding since the trial, documenting corporate suppression across every industry where breakthrough technologies threatened established profit structures. The pattern was always the same. Revolutionary discoveries were bought up, buried, or discredited to protect existing market positions. Mrs. Chen emerged from the memorial's archives, where she maintained Edgar's complete research files and correspondence. At 78, she had become the unofficial historian of the technological liberation movement, documenting not just Edgar's story, but the experiences of hundreds of inventors whose work had been suppressed over the decades. "The documentary crew wants to interview you again," Mrs. Chen told Maya. "They're particularly interested in the moment you decided to continue." Edgar's work despite the threats, Maya considered the question, that had been asked countless times since their story became public. "I don't think we ever decided," she said finally. "Edgar's technology chose us as much as we chose it. Some discoveries are too important to remain hidden, regardless of the personal cost." The afternoon brought visitors Maya had been expecting. Sarah Thompson Chen, Edgar's grandniece, accompanied by her 2 young daughters. Sarah had grown up hearing family stories about Uncle Edgar's eccentricity, but she'd never known the true extent of his genius until Maya's disclosure made him famous worldwide. Aunt Maya, the younger daughter, asked. Maya had been adopted into Edgar's extended family after proving herself worthy of his legacy. Why did the bad companies want to stop Uncle Edgar's machine? Maya knelt to the child's level, choosing her words carefully. Because Uncle Edgar's machine would have made energy free for everyone, and that would have meant less money for companies that sold expensive energy. Sometimes people do bad things to protect their profits, but now everyone has the machine. That's right. Now everyone has the machine, and no one can ever take it away again. Jake was reviewing the day's news on his tablet when something caught his attention. Maya, look at this. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the remaining executives from the Technological Stability Council. They're being charged with crimes against humanity for suppressing beneficial technologies. Maya felt a deep satisfaction that justice for Edgar was continuing to unfold years after his death. Michael Harrison had died in federal prison the previous year, but the legal precedent established by their trial had enabled prosecution of the entire suppression network. As the sun set over the memorial garden, Maya walked the path that traced the outline of Edgar's original garage. Markers along the way told the story of his 20-year battle against corporate suppression, his murder, and the global transformation that had followed the disclosure of his technology. The final marker bore Edgar's own words. Taken from his last letter, revolutionary technology belongs to humanity, not to corporations. If you're reading this, then my life's work has reached the people who needed it most. The future starts now. Maya paused at Edgar's grave, marked by a simple stone that bore his name, dates, and the inscription, "He gave humanity the stars." The atmospheric energy technology he had developed in isolation was now powering space elevators that made orbital manufacturing economically viable. The materials science breakthroughs Dr. Volkov had preserved were enabling construction of permanent colonies throughout the solar system. Edgar, Maya said quietly, you would be amazed by what humanity has accomplished with the tools you preserved. Energy poverty has been eliminated. Climate change has been reversed. Medical nanotechnology has extended healthy human lifespans to over 200 years. Your garage held the key to the next phase of human civilization. Jake joined her at the graveside, carrying a letter that had arrived that morning from the Mars Colony Administration. They want to name the first city on Mars after Edgar, he said. New Thompson. Population 100,000, all powered by atmospheric energy converters based on his original designs. As they walked back toward the memorial's main building, Maya reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with inherited junk and evolved into the liberation of half a century of suppressed human progress. Edgar. Thompson's story had proven that individual courage could triumph over the most powerful corporate interests when motivated by genuine concern for human welfare. The Edgar Thompson Institute's motto, carved in stone above the entrance, captured the essence of his legacy. Technology is the birthright of humanity. Guard it well. Maya looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, knowing that Edgar's atmospheric energy converters were powering human outposts throughout the solar system. His lonely battle in a forgotten garage had given humanity the tools to become a truly spacefaring civilization. The young couple, who had inherited a garage full of junk, had become the guardians of humanity's technological future. And somewhere among those distant stars, Edgar Thompson's dream of unlimited human potential was finally being realized.